Hello and welcome to AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. I'm your host, John S. On today's episode, we feature John H. from Orange County, California. John attended his first AA meeting in 1957. He remembers being one of the youngest people in the room, and the speaker that night was wearing a suit and talking about losing a business. John couldn't relate. He left and was drinking for the next 8 years, but got sober in 1965 in Anaheim and has been sober ever since. Why don't we let John tell his story?
I was born in the Bronx, New York City. Growing up, when I started school, folks moved around quite a bit, and I've been to 36 different elementary schools, and I hated school with a passion and kind of being moved around a lot. And I was always a new kid on the block, and I was always a new kid in class. And there's one class I'll never forget as long as I live, and it was a music class, and I didn't know it my first day in that school. And it was like 42 kids to a class, and there was 8 classes in a big auditorium, and they played some kind of music on a record. I never heard it before, and this big heavy set teacher way down in the front picked on me from way in the back there, and I don't know how she seen me, but she made me stand up in front of all those kids and wanted to know the name of that song, and I didn't know it, and she just put me down like you wouldn't believe. I almost pissed my pants. From that point on, I always hated heavy-set women. That was like an authoritative figure. I assume that's where I got it from. So growing up, I was put in a stupid class where you don't get promoted because I guess I was a little slow. And I think when I got to AA, through those experiences, unbeknownst to me at the time, this is when I could identify with the grave emotional mental disorders. I couldn't identify as an alcoholic, but I was picking up on the grave emotional mental disorders. I said, that's what I've got somehow, because I use alcohol to do for me what I couldn't do on my own. I was always a scared kid, and when I started drinking with my friends, because an Italian friend, they had these barrels down in his cellar. They had vermouth and Dago Red and stuff, and we started drinking that stuff, reading comic books.
So how old were you, John, when you started that?
Probably about 11 or 12.
Okay.
One time I got drunk. I went on an aunt's farm upstate in Austerlitz, New York. And she wasn't my aunt, but I thought she was, because growing up, we had to call her Aunt Emma. You know, there's 2 guys that was making hard cider out of these apples, and they let me have a baseball glove because I had my eye on that they had laying around, and I guess they were having fun with me, feeding me that apple cider, and I was getting kind of dizzy, and my aunt seen me in the field walking around, and she seen I was drunk, and she just bawled the hell out of those guys. So from that point on, growing up, I seen what alcohol, how it made me feel. It took my fears away, my inadequacies away. It gave me the courage to ask a girl to dance, as I was like a wallflower. I didn't dare ask them to dance because they might refuse. These are things that I've learned in AA of what it was that I was reacting to. The reason why I was afraid to ask a girl to dance, especially when I'm sober, is because if they refuse, then I would think everybody would think there's something wrong with me. The reason for that, I believe, is because I always felt like there was something wrong with me, but I never could pinpoint what it was. But alcohol took it all away. That's why I drank whenever I got the chance. They gave me an opportunity to get out of school. I had to go to a Bronx vocational high school. I went there about 9 months, and I finally got out of there and started working because it was an all-boys school, because I wasn't smart enough to go to a co-ed school. Mm-hmm. And I resented that because I wanted to go where the girls were, you know. So after I got me a part-time job delivering flowers down into Harlem and different places to just give me like a dime, a nickel to go downtown and a nickel to get back in case I got robbed or something there. That way I didn't have no money and the flowers were already paid and taken care of. I just was like a delivery boy. And then I worked for a few like Woolworths and Kruski's and a few places, and started meeting girls and stuff and having girlfriends and trying to prove myself, you know, and things just never worked out because they always left me for some reason or other or for somebody else, so I always felt rejection and the fears that I had, you know, asking anything and didn't know how to act in front of them. But when I was drinking, it didn't matter, you know, I could do what I want, say what I want, and didn't give a damn where they left me me or not. And because when I like somebody, I fall in love. I really fall in love for some reason. And so as I was going along, I got out of school, and as a kid, and you're trying to feel like a man, and you don't feel like a man because of the fears. I figure, well, I'll try to get in the Army, and that'll make me feel like a man, and. So this was in 1947, and my folks made me wait till I was 17 and a half, something like that, to get into the service. And my brother was already in the Navy. So I was getting in the Army because I didn't like the water. I spent 3 years in the Army over in Japan in occupation forces. That's where I really learned good about sex and boozing it up and everything. And I got busted because from a PFC down to a private. Because the MPs would bring me back to camp, see me walking the streets over there in Japan, and the guard at the gate would turn me in, my MPs brought me to the gate. They didn't give me no, write me up or nothing, but the guard at the gate would. And then they'd put me on hard labor. I'd have to carry coal from one end of the camp to the other for hard labor. The colonel was going to court-martial me, but the captain already put me on hard labor, so he couldn't do nothing. Because he used to have a wooden fence on one end of the camp where they had this stacks of coal, and there was like a couple of loose boards that knock them out and get out of camp, go get some more booze, bring it back and stick it in the coal bucket as I was walking to the other end of the camp. And so
far, your story sounds a lot like mine so far as alcohol goes, because it doesn't sound like you ever really had any normal drinking, did you?
No, not that I thought it was normal, but because everybody was drinking that I hung with.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you didn't drink, I figured you were an oddball. I didn't trust you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you wasn't like the rest of us. And
yeah.
Because it's just like the weirdos. They'd be in camp, they wouldn't drink, and they'd write letters at home and everything else like that. And I figured they had deadheads and not having no fun. And I was having fun because when I drank, I felt free. I could do what I want, and and the consequences that you have to pay is just part of the game. So
I relate to a lot of that because I grew up also moving around as an Army brat, and I was always the new kid in school. I also found alcohol at an early age, and it took away all of my fears and insecurities, it seemed anyway.
Yeah.
And made it possible for me to ask a girl out or whatever. But eventually, it kind of turned on me. But so you were over in Japan, and so your drinking was continuing to get bad, and you were having problems.
I ended up in the psycho ward in the Tokyo General Hospital in a padded cell with a straitjacket. And the thing that scared me when they told me I was in a hospital, for some reason, that scared me. I thought maybe I was in jail someplace because I was in that straitjacket, and when I woke up, my eyes, I could see just bars and these eyes looking down at me. And when they come in and took the straitjacket off because they seen I was just awake, my arms were loaded with needle shots on both arms, and I could hardly move them. And they said that, I almost didn't pull through, when they were, whatever they were doing to get me that point. And the only thing I remember is I was drinking one day in a club that we had. And when I was drinking there, I fell on the ground, and I tried to get up, and I couldn't get up because the ground was moving all around. And I kept falling down. Then the next thing I remember, I'm in the Tokyo General Hospital there. And they were going to court-martial me because I was on my own time. See, I was like a security guard there for a while. And it was a publication outfit where we sent publications out to different outfits. When I got busted, I didn't have any clothes on, and they gave me a pair of pajamas to go back to Yokohama because this was up in Tokyo when I was at the hospital. And so I had to ride the train in a pair of pajamas, and all the Japanese were looking at me and stuff, and I felt weird because I didn't have no booze in me now. I didn't know how to handle it. So by the time I got back to camp, then they put me on hard labor and stuff. But a circular had come out because it was getting time for me to either get out of the service or re-enlist, and I wanted to re-enlist. And the circular came out if I had more than 6 months of 6 months of service. I'm getting this balled up, I guess, because it's kind of hazy. A circular had come out. I forget what it was, an AR Army regulation or SR special regulation. I forget which one. But if you have, I forget it was over 6 months. I think over 2 years of service, and you was only a private or something, you couldn't re-enlist.
Okay.
And that got me mad because they wanted me to go they said I can go into the reserves or something, but I couldn't re-enlist. And I said, no, if you ain't going to let me stay in, I'm just going to get out.
Yeah.
And because I was really enjoying myself over there, being drunk all the time and stuff.
I know. I thought it was kind of interesting because it sounded like you were having a hard time in the service. They put you on hard labor and everything, but you still wanted to re-enlist.
Yeah, because I guess it must have been the discipline that I liked, and without realizing it, I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Because I was never smart enough to figure that out, and a lot of that stuff at that time never entered my mind. It's just like I always figured I could stop drinking whenever I wanted to, but it just never entered my mind that I wanted to, There's times when I wanted to cut down, but then I always overdid it. It's just like when I'm in a bar with my friends and we're drinking and 11 o'clock comes around, they got to go home because they got work the next day, and I'm just getting started.
Exactly.
I figure they're party poopers, and
yeah.
I get some booze and go over somebody's house and spend the rest of the night and then go to work drunk the next day. And a lot of times you got covered up, it ride you around and stuff because I worked for the city at the time. And so they help you out just like you help them out when they get half loaded or something, and you cover up a little,
So did you leave the service just straight out of Japan? Did you come back to the state?
Yeah, because I see, in 6 months I could have made the PFC back, but I didn't have 6 months left, so that's why I couldn't re-enlist. They tried to do what they could because they said I was a good soldier. I didn't know when to come back home to the camp. When I got discharged, I think it was out in Seattle someplace, and then I had to take the bus all the way back to New York because it was cheaper, because I remember it was $57.57 because they both come out even that way. That's how I remembered the price of the bus. I got hung up in a hotel room waiting for some girl, and I was smart enough at the time to put my wallet underneath the rug by the bedpost in case anybody tries to steal anything, and sure enough, I don't remember no girl because I was passed out, but when I get up the next day, and I got my wallet okay, but when I reached in my Ike jacket, my bus ticket was gone, so I had to pay for another one. And I complained to the hotel room, but they don't know nothing. They covered themselves up. So that was in Seattle, Washington. And
So you went back to New York ultimately?
Yeah, well, I let's see. When I got back there, I was... Before I went overseas, I was at Fort Meade, Maryland, and after basic training in Fort Dix, New Jersey. And that I wanted to go overseas, so I put in for that, and then they let me go overseas. When I come back, I don't quite remember how that worked out. We were on a bus with a bunch of GIs, and going back east from Seattle, and it was having snowstorms, and they had 30 seats on the bus, and I had the 31st seat. I had where the doors open, that's where I had to sit, and then we had to push the bus out of the snow from getting stuck all the time. So by the time I got back to New York, I got discharged and everything out here. They put the ruptured duck on you and stuff, and mustering out pay and stuff. So I was drinking along the way, and we had a lot of booze on the bus, and we were just having a ball because everybody's discharged. And when I got back east, I don't remember going to any camp because I was discharged, but I was going home, and it's kind of blurry to me about that. I don't quite remember just what happened now.
Yeah.
But I met the folks. They had a car because I was giving them a allotment check. So they paid for an old car and had it for me when I got back there. So.
Okay. So how long did you stay in New York after you got out of the Army?
Well, I'm used to drinking now. The guys were hanging around the blocks, and they wasn't drinking. And, I just got tired of hanging around with them because I want to move around now because so I went upstate New York, and that's where I seen this girl, and I fell in love like you wouldn't believe. But she was only 15, and I was, 21. Yeah, and so her sister worked up in the mountain, and so I went up to the mountain and got a job, and it's called Lake Mohonk, upstate New York. When I met her, I started taking her and her sister and her husband and stuff, and we'd all get together and get down and have a little drinking party and stuff. And, and then I'd take them all back up in the mountains. And a lot of times it was foggy, and I had the car, so the car was always loaded with people. I had a 35 Dodge, and I'd have to open the door and put my head way down by the ground so I can see where I'm going, And then when you had the parking spot, the area where you park, and then the limousine pick you up and takes you 2.5 more miles up the mountain, unless you walked, and a lot of times we'd walk. And so that was kind of nice up there. I was working on the grounds and painting a little bit, the rustic areas and stuff. Lake Mohonk is what they call the place, because it had a lake and everything up there. And they liked my work, so they put me in the kitchen. I had the title of a second vegetable cook, but I didn't know how to cook nothing. They told me, how to put stuff in the steamer and stuff, and peel potatoes. They had a machine. They just bounce around until the peelings come off. If you didn't watch what you're doing, they got like little marbles, and because sometimes when I'm feeling pretty good, I don't pay attention sometimes. And so that was okay for a while, but then I started getting serious with this girl, and I wanted to marry her, but I didn't have no real job, so they had a job down in Poughkeepsie, and I started working in this factory where they make laundry baskets and stuff.
Okay.
And because all her brothers and uncles and brother-in-laws all worked in the same place.
So that girl that you married, is that who you're married to today?
No.
No, okay, that was your first wife?
Yeah, and when she left me and kind of my drinking, I was trying to commit suicide and everything else, and I'm a failure at that. I was going to climb over that bridge and, just do myself in.
So you're in your 20s now, John, at this time, you're about in your 20s?
Yeah, I was in my 20s then, because I got out of the service and I was 21. I was 6 years older than my wife, and she was 15 when I met her, and after 2 years we got married.
Okay.
Let's see, 17 she was when I married her.
Now you're getting very, I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt.
Go ahead.
Well, now, because you're getting very depressed, suicidal, and I was at that point in my life too, in my 20s.
Yeah.
And your drinking obviously is progressing.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But I didn't feel it was progressing, because it never got as bad as when I was in a psycho ward. You see, and I didn't think it was the booze that did that, because I heard they had bad stuff over there, and that's what I got a hold of, was some bad stuff. That's why I ended up in the hospital. And without me realizing it, I think I was always able to justify whatever situation I was in or whatever for some reason, but not the booze. Because how could the booze be a problem to me if it's working for me so good?
Yeah.
Because at that time I wasn't thinking like that, but when I got in AA, I started looking back and seeing.
So what was finally your bottom, John?
My bottom. Well, I think my bottom started when my wife left me and kind of my drinking, but I was picking it up as she met somebody else and this and that, and I used to go to bars trying to find out who it is. I didn't know what he looked like, didn't know his name or nothing, but I was hunting around looking for somebody. I wanted to kill him, but it was kind of stupid when I look at it now, because I didn't know his name or anything, and I might have known his first name, but I don't remember what it was. But I was looking for somebody to kill him, messing with my wife or something. Because I remember one time or a couple of times, she gave me an ultimatum: either come home now or we've had it. All right, and this one time I knew she meant it, but I couldn't come home, and I couldn't comprehend that, why I couldn't go home, because I knew she meant it, that she's going to leave me this time, and I had to finish my run,
Yeah.
And so then when I got back, all hell broke loose and shit, and so she's going to divorce me and all that jazz, and I knew she found somebody else then, But,
so is that about when you started going to meetings?
No. This I can't remember the date when it was, but it was in the 50s. And my first AA meeting is after they shipped me out to California to my folks' house, because they lived in Anaheim, and my folks sent money back there so I can get on a Greyhound bus, not a Greyhound bus, but on an airplane to ship me out to California.
Okay.
And after the suicide attempt and stuff, because I was really causing a lot of trouble then.
Okay. So your parents kind of intervened, and I'm sorry, I kind of probably interrupted your story, but your parents intervened because you were having these problems when you were working in Poughkeepsie, and you were suicidal, and they shipped you out to Anaheim?
Yeah, because that's where they lived.
Oh, your parents lived there at that time.
Yeah, in Anaheim.
Okay.
So they sent me money, and my brother-in-laws took me down to the airport in New York from Poughkeepsie because they kept their eye on me because they're afraid I'll go back and cause more trouble, trying to get the wife back, and I want my daughter and all that jazz, because I had a daughter from her, and we hit it off good till she was 3 years old. That's when they got rid of me, because I remember they pulled me out of the bar room, and I was kneeling on my hands, my knees and hands, looking in my daughter's blue eyes. She was 3 years old then. And I said, Daddy's leaving. He's never coming back because nobody wants me, and I was crying. I seen the big blue eyes. She just looking at me. She didn't know what was going on, I guess. And that's when they took her away, took me down to the airport and made sure I got on the plane. And I get out here to California, but on the plane it was kind of weird because I'd have tears in my eyes, thinking, geez, my marriage is over, the woman I loved, I'm never going to see her again, and I'm never going to see my daughter. And then the next moment, my emotions changed. I say, boy, I'm free now, and I can drink the way I want, nobody bugging me, and then I'd go back into this self-pity kick again, thinking my wife left me, and I'm going to see my daughter, nothing, and then it'd come back again, I'm free, and come out here, I can drink the way I want.
Okay.
But I could never get along with my dad. And they got me a job down in L.A. in a heat treating place. I used to drive with my dad, would take his car one time, would take my car one time, but I'd get drunk all the time. And I was told to leave the keys with the bartenders if I'm too drunk to drive, So this one time I left the car, the keys, but I couldn't remember what bar it was that I left them in.
Yeah.
And it pissed my dad off because his car wouldn't run, and I didn't have mine. It was at some bar. So he bawled me out, and we had it out and stuff. So I left there, and when I did get the car, I'd park in the parking lot where I worked, and I'd sleep there all night and stuff. And the lead man seen me, and he says, okay, you could stay with us for a week or two, and we'll get you a room somewhere up in Monterey Park. And so that worked out all right. But that's when I found out he just wanted a drinking buddy, And it was at this time I was trying to get back into the service because I figured I'd try to get an allotment for my daughter. That way I'd be able to support her because I kind of felt guilty not being able to support her. And if I got in the service, I can get a Class E allotment like I did with the folks and not have it for her that I'll be supporting my own kid anyway. But my IQ wasn't high enough. It was 82 when I first went into the service, and now it's down in 64. And so I tried to get back in the service. They said according to my urine test and stuff and blood test, they said you should be still passed out.
Wow.
And
the alcohol was just in your system.
Because I was drinking for a whole week straight there, and I had to stop. So I started tapering off so I get down to take the test because it was important to me because that was my one chance I could support my daughter, with being in service. That way I eat food, and stuff, and maybe I could straighten up a little bit, be able to have the allotment going towards my daughter. At least I'd be getting her something. And so nothing ever seemed to work out too good that I ever tried, but that was the best I could do at the time. They didn't take me into the service, and I tried to get in the Marines, but that's when I found out my IQ wasn't high enough. It needed 110. I was way off from that.
So when did you start going to AA? And were you sober from your first meeting, John, or did you start going earlier and then try it again later?
Yeah, I tried 2 meetings in 1957.
Okay.
I was still out here at the time.
Okay.
And that's when I lived in Monterey Park, and I was drinking the wine by the gallon. It was only $1.64 plus tax.
Do you remember the meeting in 1957? What it was like?
It was in Temple City, I believe. I lived in Monterey Park, and there was somebody because I kept saying, I got to stop drinking one of these days. I got to get straight. And somebody said, I know a guy that's in AA. if you want to try it. I says, well, anything's better than what I'm doing. So he introduced me to this guy, and the guy took me to this meeting, and I guess it was in Temple City. It was like,
Okay.
I understand now, it was in the park, and there was a big wooden building, and they had this big open room where they had the AA meetings.
Okay.
And I remember there was just all old people, and I was in my late 20s.
Okay.
And it was all old people, and they had canes, and they're shaking.
Really?
And there was one young guy that I remember, they were trying to sober him up, giving him coffee and stuff. Well, I was still drunk, but I was able to walk around and you know, not bother nobody, and I was able to sit down, but I was watching what's going on, and there was some guy in a suit at the podium. It must have been a speaker meeting, talking about some business he lost. And I could have cared less. There he is with a suit on.
Right.
He has a business he lost. So he's already out of my league, you know, and I'm saying, you know, this is AA. This is, you know, what's here that it's going to stop me from drinking, listening to this stuff, you know. And so I didn't fit in there.
Okay.
And I realize now I wasn't ready to stop anyway. You know, I'm just trying to slow down so I'll be able to support my daughter somehow. Because everything I tried never worked. So I never went back to AA then because I knew in my head AA didn't work.
Right.
The guy took me there twice, same old thing, same meeting. And so I figured there's nothing in AA that I want that's going to help me out.
Right.
You know, I don't remember him talking about drinking and stuff. I just remembered about he's got a suit on and he lost some business. So I couldn't identify with nothing there. And the people were all older than I was.
Yeah.
And so I left there and started working, you know, odd jobs and stuff to exist. Used to wash myself in a kiddie pool and stuff at night when the cops wasn't around. I'd know how to turn the water on and get myself showered, you know, and put my clothes on and all. That way I'd lay in the park and they'd dry out in the sun when the sun started coming out.
So, John, you must have, because I think you got sober in 1965. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So you drank for like 8 years after that meeting in 57. So let's talk about your experience in AA from the time you got to that meeting in 1965. Do you remember that first meeting?
Yes, I do, because I called an operator. I'm married to this wife now that I have. Okay. Because a lot of stuff happened in between with Boston and everything. And so when I married this wife, because I got her pregnant, see, and so after I married her, we moved out here to California because I knew I could make more money.
Right.
So we got out here, and she started working for a donut shop, and I was working for the city of Bryant Park at the time. And I called the operator because I was in a bar this one night, and I should supposed to have been home babysitting because the wife was working, and I just left home and started drinking. And I didn't know I was babysitting, you know. And my mother had to go down and take care of the kids. They tried to get me out of the bar, and I said, I can't leave. So I got to stay here. I felt safe there for some reason. It's like my whole life passed right through me. And I remember those two meetings in 1957 that I went to, but I didn't remember where it was at and who to call. So I called the operator. And didn't get a hold of AA for me. And they got somebody to talk to me on the phone. And they mentioned the Women's Club in Buena Park, and I was familiar with that because I worked for the city. So I knew where it was at. So I didn't drink for 3 days on the hope that I was going to get some help. But now that I didn't have no booze in me for those 3 days, I didn't have the courage to walk into the meeting. So I asked my wife if she'd go with me, and she says okay, because she was about ready to leave me too. And so she went with me, and they gave us something to read, and we kept passing it back and forth to each other because we were both scared, and I didn't know what to expect. And this is when she found Al-Anon was in the next room. They had this long door, they slide closed. And so after the AA meeting, I really didn't remember much about it, learned too much. It's just I was getting to know the people. And this is when they told my wife that Al-Anon's in the other room, see? Right. Because they were always laughing over there, seemed to have fun. And we're in this other room, everybody's gloomy and gloomy.
That's funny.
So,
and your wife's been an Al-Anon ever since, too, hasn't she?
Yes, same time as a week after me, because she made her first Al-Anon meeting the following week in the same place. Only she went into the other room because we didn't know anything about Al-Anon or nothing then. So we've been going to meetings ever since. And I didn't know what I was all my life. I I wasn't forced to go to church or nothing. And the only time my folks made us go to church, because there was 3 of us kids at the time. My other brother came later. But at that time, like Easter, my mother make us go to church because that way she'd get 3 Easter plants, because they gave out plants on Easter to the kids to bring home to their parents. So my mother got 3 Easter plants, so every Easter we had to go to church. And I resented.
But you weren't you weren't religious though. You weren't religious though.
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
And but when we went to church that day, my brother and sister, because they were a little bit older, they went in a room where they were singing and they had the music, and I had to be in a classroom. And here I was in class again, and here it's Sunday. It's my time off, I always figured. And I'm in there learning about some Ezekiah or something like that.
Right.
I don't know what the hell it was.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful today that I was never forced to have to go to church like some kids do, because that gave me more freedom to stay away from that stuff. But I liked the music and stuff, it sounded nice. And I wanted to try to believe like my friends and stuff did, but I just never could believe like they did.
So tell me this, when you were in AA, when you started out in AA in 1965, was it?
No, it was 1965.
Right, in 1965, when you started out, what did AA seem like it was very religious to you at that time?
I was sober for 3 weeks, and then this God stuff started hitting me. And I said, oh, no, every time I turn around, there's got to be this God stuff. And I started realizing it's a religious movement.
Okay.
Because it has to be, because I got their book. I was sober 29 days when I got the book. And when I got the book, I started reading it. It's God all the way through the damn thing.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, shit, getting the Boy Scouts, I got to believe in God. Getting the DeMolays, I got to believe in God. So what happened through the years, I became a liar on kind of this God shit.
Right.
You see, just to be accepted.
Right.
And without me realizing, I had a lot of this hatred and stuff built up inside of me because I had to become a liar on account of that stuff. And when I got to AA, it started showing up. From my 3rd week on, I started getting miserable. I figured, geez, people are taking me to different meetings. Everything's nice. Seem like nice people.
Yeah.
And my wife, she was already religious because she's one of them Irish Catholics. She went to parochial schools and stuff. But we never had a problem in our home between us on kind of that.
Sure.
And so as I was going to meetings, I started getting very uncomfortable with all the stuff I was hearing on this God stuff, and I almost didn't make it.
Right.
Many times I wanted to run away from AA and kind of this God stuff. There's some people there come down real heavy on you.
Sure.
And I started getting very defiant, and I used to, by this time I found the Anaheim Club, because there they had meetings every night. I didn't have to wait a week to go to another meeting. The guy was taking me around to different meetings every night, and I couldn't stand him because he just yak about some kind of shit in AA, and I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to stay sober right now. And so I've been called all kinds of names and everything because here I started getting honest, because they told me it's an honest program, won't work without it. So I started getting honest. I told them I can't buy the God stuff. So some of the people say, that's okay, John. You just keep coming back. And then there'd be others. I was called the atheist asshole. And I figure, well, by this time I found out I'm just an agnostic. I don't know whether there is a God or isn't. And today I don't give a shit.
Don't care.
I really don't give a shit today. and I'm really grateful for that, because I don't want what they got.
Right.
They get guilty and they're controlled and everything else by what they believe, and I'm not controlled by what I believe or don't believe now. See?
Yeah.
I feel more freer than they do. I can do things that they feel guilty over, and I don't have to feel guilty.
So in those meetings, those AA meetings, when you started getting defiant and speaking out and being honest, did they pray in those meetings, and did you join them? How'd you deal with that? If they pray, I don't know.
When I started, they didn't even hold hands. They just said the Serenity Prayer.
Okay.
Well, I didn't like that, but I started saying that because it's like a format that they have, and I'm trying to desperately. I had desperation go for me like you wouldn't believe, and I was trying everything just not to drink. And the stuff they're telling me, I say, boy, if I have to believe in God, I'm screwed. I'll never make this. And because some of them were telling me that, and they're telling me I'm going to get drunk if I don't have God in my program. I'm going to get drunk if I don't work the steps in a row. And that hasn't been my experience. I got to the point I had 8 months of sobriety, and I hated everybody in there because they're bugging the shit out of me and telling me I'm going to get drunk if I don't see things the way they do, or like the big book says. And I'm telling them, take the big book and stick it up your ass, and take your God and stick it up your ass. And I says, I'm not drinking, and that's what I came for, and that's all I'm going to do. I'll go to, because I knew while I was going to meetings, I wasn't drinking. But what I was hearing, I was triggering off things from my childhood and shit, that I completely forgot about and stuff. And somebody had mentioned, I think it was my first sponsor, that will relive the past in my sobriety. And that's what was happening, because everything that I was experiencing bring me back to childhood again. But the old timers, the grouchy bastards, I couldn't stand them because they're pound fisting and shit, and some of them probably colonels and generals and shit from the service and stuff. And this is the kind of shit I'm getting in AA from these old timers. I hated them with a passion.
And those old timers would have been like the original AA guys, right, from the 1940s?
Probably some of them.
Yeah.
But I got there in 65, so I know a few of them used to speak. I've heard their names in the book and stuff, but I can't think of their names right now. But as I go along, it's just like the doctors. There's a doctor's story in the book, and Frank got the doctor. They had the doctor's story in the book. What the hell was it? I knew him because the Friday night men's stag I used to go to. Frank O. In the book, it's Frank O.
Oh, okay.
His name is O'Rourke. He's passed away now.
Yeah.
But he was a lawyer, and there was another lawyer, Phil Petty. He's passed away. They used to go to Friday night men's stag, and they talk so nice that I really liked the way they talked.
Okay.
And because they explained things a little bit better, but they were still believers, so I didn't trust them.
Right. Okay.
But they were at the Friday night men's stag, and Frank's the one that got the doctor in the program.
Yeah.
And Dr. Paul, I think it was. And,
so you were going to meetings at the Anaheim Club, being honest about not liking God, and you were having, some people gave you a hard time, some people didn't.
Oh, yeah, I almost got a fist fight with a preacher and another alcoholic across the street where we parked.
Yeah, and you also said that you guys weren't holding hands at the time when you prayed, you did the Serenity Prayer. And also, John, when I was first talking to you, when I first met you, you told me that they weren't so big into the steps back then, that it was mainly the 12-step. They all wanted to go down and work and answering the phones. Is that kind of how it was?
Well, no, I'd go down to Anaheim Club, and they'd get a lot of phone calls at the club that somebody needs help. So they'd yell out, anybody want to go on a 12-step call, see?
Yep.
And everybody was handing it to me.
Oh, really?
And it got to the point where I didn't want to go down the club because every time I get down there, I lose my spot and my parking spot when the meeting's ready to start. Because they knew that I'd be going, and the only reason why I was going, I didn't want to feel guilty.
Right.
You see, then I started resenting them. If they were answering the phone, why the hell don't they go on a 12-step call?
But they would send you, and you would go?
Yes. And I'd go all over the place, and I'd get lost sometimes.
Yeah.
They'd send me to Long Beach, and I'd get lost. Then sometimes
So what would you do, John, when you went out on a 12-step call? What would you do?
I just, if it's a hotel room or whatever, it's always different. And you're supposed to go with somebody because they said if you have any problems, at least you got another person to help you handle it.
Right. That's what they always told me.
I didn't like a lot of that because I had to listen to their baloney. What they're telling the person, if they're a believer, I couldn't buy it anyway, so I want them to see my side. You don't have to buy the God stuff, you don't drink, you keep coming back, and you work with others.
Yeah.
And there's one place there, I went with my sponsor, and he told the guy what he had to tell him. Then he told me, tell him, John, how you staying sober? And I told him, I'm not drinking right now.
Okay.
That's the only thing I knew that was keeping me sober. I didn't like the program. I didn't like people in it because they were bugging me all the time about this God stuff.
Yeah.
And my sponsor left.
It's funny they sent you on all those 12-step calls when you were the one that was telling them that you didn't believe in God.
Yeah, well, you see, this is when I see, they pass the buck. You really can't trust another alcoholic to count on them.
Yeah.
I learned that through the years. They mean well, but they don't come through, just like a lot of times I mean well, and I don't come through,
Yeah.
So when other alcoholics told me they'll meet me someplace or this or that, I figure, well, okay, if it happens, okay, fine. But if it don't, I'm not going to get a resentment from it, see, because
I bet you all those 12-step calls, though, helped you stay sober.
That's exactly what it was doing.
Yeah.
And and now later on down the road, as they started getting into the book more, this is when I had the problems, because now you get a sponsor, get somebody who's got a working knowledge of the big book, and that just drives me up a wall.
That's interesting. So you started off, you were just doing the 12-step calls, and now all of a sudden they're all getting into the book.
Yeah, and by this time they're holding hands now.
Okay, great. Okay, so they're holding hands and praying, and they're reading the big book.
Yeah, and I'm there, I'm holding hands, and if it was a young girl, I'd squeeze it sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
Then I'd go home to that bitch that I'm married to, because I couldn't stand her, and she's pulling that Al-Anon stuff on me. Right. Work it the way you're comfortable, you know, and I'd want to get down. I was trying to save my money to get enough money to buy a gun and get down and kill all those sick Al-Anons, teaching my wife all that sick shit. And it was a real bad first year for me.
Oh, yeah.
And then when I get into my second year, it got much worse.
Yeah.
People expected stuff out of me, and all I could do was not drink and go to meetings.
Yep.
I didn't have no time for my family, screw them. And without realizing it, one day I started experiencing, I wish something drastic would happen to these goddamn kids and this wife so I'd be free, so I can go back and get my first wife back. Because that's the one I was in love with. I married this one in kind of loneliness, and it never happened, you see. So I was stuck with this one. I used to lay in bed and sob and cry, really heavy tears, man, you know.
Yeah.
Wow. If I could just get rid of this damn family, I'd be free and I can go back and get my first wife back. It never entered my mind that she probably wouldn't want me back anyway.
Right.
And I'm out here in California, and now she's in Florida somewhere. And so we moved from upstate to Florida. So I lost contact with my daughter, and then one day I got a letter in the mail from my daughter. She said, I don't care whether you're alcoholic or not, you're still my father. And I broke down and started crying for the first time in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
And I'd go to conventions, and I'd hear women about meeting their kids and watching them go through, you graduate from high school and college, and I missed all that stuff with my daughter. You know, but I'd get choked up, and I remember one time, like it was yesterday, I got in the hospitality room. I had to walk out of there. It was a woman's Al-Anon dinner at the time, and I broke down out in the I'm getting balled up here. The hospitality room. I walked out into the hospitality room because I was getting too emotional, and this one lady I know, she seen me, and she bought this book, Came to Believe. And oh shit, these people think I'm this power greater than myself has took over me, and I'm finding God now and shit. You know, the Came to Believe book. I can't stand that sucker.
Yeah.
And there was a time when they had that black book, the 24-hour day book.
Oh yeah, I remember that book.
I heard so much about that. Somebody bought one for me one time, and I said, I couldn't stand that. That's worse than anything.
Yeah, that was almost like the Bible.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, you know. Yeah. And all these people, just because I break down once in a while, they think I'm having a spiritual experience. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yeah.
And, you know, like anything good happens, it's a God shot.
Yeah.
You know,
plus they saw you staying sober, and a lot of those people didn't think you could stay sober without God, but you're staying sober anyway.
When I had my agnostic meeting going, which I stopped because after several years they quit coming to it.
Okay.
You know, and then when I stopped it, they say, hey, I got somebody from Connecticut came there, and I said, well, I got a SOS meeting. Now I changed it to that because nobody's coming for the agnostic meeting, and they were agnostic from Ohio someplace. And so it was a husband and wife thing. So we had a nice little talk there and stuff. And I told them what was what. And I told them there's a few meetings they can go to and stuff that was close by because they were in some hotel room.
So I know that you had a hard time in the beginning with the people giving you a hard time. But after a while, did they... You got accepted, I guess, by the people in AA. Didn't they gave you a nickname or something? They called you. Were you called Spiritual John?
They called me Spiritual John. Yeah. Pretty close at the same time. I don't know which one came first. The Friday Night Men Stag, because I used to tell them where to take the God and stick it.
Right.
And this one guy, I used to belong to the old Farts Running Club from that group. And this one guy that was the president of the club, he nicknamed me Spiritual John because I was always pissing him on about the God stuff. And then I'd gone to Indian Charlie meetings. That was a good, nice, big, good, strong group. But most of them are dead now, so it's just a small group now. But they nicknamed me Spiritual John about the same time. I don't know which one came first. Okay. And because I used to go up to the podium there. You know, you got to be there at least a year before they let you get up to the podium. And I get up to the podium, and I told them where to take their God and stick it and stuff, too, so they started calling me Spiritual John, you know. Okay. The anger was so great, I didn't give a shit if somebody kicked the shit out of me or whatever. Right. See, because they... see, I didn't know I had the God problem really like as bad as it was, and until I got to AA. And the longer I stayed sober, the more it started coming up. And the response.
What's the doorknob story? Did you start wearing the doorknob, or did someone give that to you?
Well, I started wearing a doorknob, half of one. Okay. And to get even with the old timers, because they say if you can't buy the God stuff, make it a doorknob, make it a light bulb. So I got a light bulb at a trick store, so when your ring touches it, it lights up. Okay. I said, there's my goddamn higher power, a light bulb, see? And then later on down the years, you know, they kept saying, make it a doorknob if you can't go for the God stuff. And I'm telling myself, how stupid it is. I know they mean God, you know, all that shit. Right. So I started wearing a doorknob with a yellow ribbon tied around my neck. And they said, what's that? I put HP on the doorknob. So, and so to get even with the old timers, you know? Right. I know what the hell they meant. They meant this God shit. Yeah. So I started wearing it at the conventions, too. And this really got some people going. And so what happened, a friend of mine, he's ended up to be a cross-dresser now. I haven't seen him for years. Yeah. But he was into antiques and stuff. And then one day, I forget what birthday it was. It was AA birthday, but I forget what year. And he brought this doorknob over. He says, this is happy birthday for you. And I said, God, that's terrific. You know, he had wooden links. I'll show you a picture of it. I got it in my garage right now because the guy sold the archives. He wanted it because I used to wear it at conventions and stuff, and everybody would be looking. You know, my Defiance is what was giving me the courage to do this shit. Yeah. Because to get the courage before, I'd have to have booze in me. Now I'm able to do things that I don't have booze, and that's why I figured Defiance became my greatest asset because I was able to get up to the podium and tell them off, and this way I was starting to be able to talk at the podium and stuff. Instead of my legs shaking and being scared, you know.
So when did you first start learning about the agnostic meetings? And you eventually started one, but when did you first learn that there were agnostic AA meetings?
Okay, I was down the Anaheim Club one time, and I seen that it was a Sober Times. They had some newspapers down there, but then Sober Times. And once in a while, I'd bring one home, and I started reading it. And then it said SOS, Secular Organization for Sobriety. Right. And it says, son of a bitch, I'm going to call and find out about that. So I made the call. I got hooked up with this guy. He had SOS meetings in those hospitals. I forget, Kaiser Hospital things. They had a meeting there. And I went to it, and I met this guy, John. He was the secretary of the meeting. So I started going there every week, and then we got to talking. He said, yeah, there's some agnostic meetings down in L.A. He says, there's about 4 of them. I says, oh, yeah, I didn't know that. So he says, if you want to go, I'll take you sometime. So he took me at different times, he took me to different ones there. And then he took me to this one, what's that guy, Charlie Polak?
Oh, yeah, the Charlie P. I don't know how to pronounce it.
But I didn't know him at the time. Polachek. I didn't know him at the time, and I've only been to those meetings maybe once or twice, so I really didn't know who was who and what was what. But this one meeting, I asked the guy, can I have the format? I want to start one in Orange County. He says, yeah, he sent it to me in the mail, and I changed it a little bit, and I started my agnostic meetings, because there's a lot of people around here that felt like I did, and they kept on my back. When are you going to start that agnostic meeting, John? When are you going to start it?
And when was it that you started that? What year do you remember?
I think 1984.
84, okay.
It was 84 or 94. Now, I forget which one. Okay. I got a picture around here someplace because my wife made a cake. The agnostic meeting's the first one. It started in August. Okay. And several years later, we had about 10 or 12 people. And then it got down to about 7. Okay. And then it got less and less. But before I ended it, my wife told me I'd come home from work one day, and my wife says, there's a guy that's been walking up and down the street looking at our house.
Uh-huh.
And I probably said, it's probably some weirdo, I don't know, or maybe he's wondering about the meeting, maybe, because it was on Monday night, and that's when I had the meeting, and maybe he's looking for the meeting, and, see what house it is. And then she said he came to the door and he asked if there was a meeting here. And she says, yeah, tonight. He says, okay, I'll be back. So she was relating this to me when I get home. So when I got the meeting getting ready, this guy walks in and he's got a cake, a little round cake, and he introduced himself. I says, I'm John. And I says, just maybe a few people might be here now because, they're slowing down and coming. So I had him lead the meeting, and I don't remember how he led it and stuff because it's a while back. And this was Charlie Polachek or whatever it was. And
it was.
The cake he brought was for his birthday. He celebrated his 25th birthday in my garage at the Agnostic meeting.
How about that?
And the only remembrance I have, I didn't even know he moved to Texas or whatever because I didn't know him that well. That's probably the second time I ever met him.
Yeah.
But a question I had for him, because he had some time. He's celebrating his 25 years then. I think I had a few more years more than that at the time. But I tell him one of my fears is that some of my friends, they like to heckle me sometimes. And I said, they're liable to get a group and come over here once, start praying stuff. He says, well, let them do it. Let them pray. And then he says the following week you take a group conscience and then you stop praying. And it made it sound so simple that it wasn't a problem to me no more. And I thanked him an awful lot for his wisdom,
Right.
I had an answer now.
Yeah.
It's just, with my anger and stuff, I was fighting these people all these years, and I always wanted to start something on my own without this God stuff, all this religious shit, because it kept getting worse and worse, and it's really bad now, much worse. Yeah. But I didn't know how. I didn't have the smarts.
Right.
And now, let's see, I'm getting balled up against you now. The guy that took me to those meetings, he went and got drunk again after 10 years of sobriety. And when nobody was coming, I was sitting here by myself week after week. Once in a while, one person would show up. And so I said, I'm going to have to give it up because now I was getting into this SOS, and going to some of their meetings. And they're very small, and there's only a few people at each one.
Yeah.
And I met the founder and stuff. And Chris, he's a pretty nice guy. But
yeah.
He pulled out of AA 3 years of sobriety, and he's supposed to have been a writer, so he kept going around getting all kinds of information and then writing some books of his own.
Right.
So
okay.
I got to know him and stuff. I didn't want to pull away from AA because I was feeling guilty if I did.
Right.
But I couldn't stand that, and I started meeting a lot of friends that I was getting along with.
Yeah.
And my super sensitivity started leaving me, and so I started joking around. I see one now every time I go to Friday night, Brea Men's Stag. This guy sees me, he gives me the sign of the cross. So I give him a sign of the cross upside down, see? And I love the guy, so it's, it's a fun thing. They kid me, I kid them, and they keep looking at me to see if my lips are moving when they're holding hands saying the Lord's Prayer. Yeah. I tell them, that's against the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, to my understanding. And they said, well, we can run the meeting any way we see fit. And now I hear that they're doing the same thing at every 5 years, the AA meeting that AA puts on, they're doing the same thing now. And
they're not supposed to be doing that. I think they didn't do it the last one.
I know. I never heard of them doing it before, but they said they did it the last couple of times. Yeah. So you see, their whole thing is headed towards religion, and I think it already was. That's what I was picking up on. That's religious.
So
they said, no,
you were real happy when you heard about WAF.
Oh God, I got choked up when I was at the convention. I only went for the one day, and there was one guy there. I can't. He's got a B in his name. I can't remember what it is, but he's pretty known around Southern California. I forget what it was, Ireland or England, where he come from.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about. An Irish guy. I remember him.
Mickey B, I think it was.
Okay, yep, I remember him.
I took a picture with him at the convention because I'd never heard him speak, but I've heard a lot about him from different people there. So I had a picture taken with him and at the convention there. And I got this little round coin thing. It looks like a brass coin thing from the convention. They said I got the last one.
That's nice.
And I still got it in my drawer, and I showed him. I said, look at this here watch, man. He had one A in it then.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I'm showing it. They're all laughing at me because I'm going to go to a convention, right? Agnostic convention, and they're going to have a minister speaking in the church. Well, they were putting me down and kidding me, and these people that's doing it are friends of mine, and I really like them. But so we kid each other back and forth. I said, it's okay, just the beginning, something's happening here.
So were you there that day when Ward Ewing talked?
When you were doing what?
Were you there on the day that the minister talked when Ward Ewing talked?
I was on the last day I got there.
The last day, okay.
I think that was a Saturday, I'm not sure, because I couldn't make the whole three of them because of my wife. When I made it, I'd get choked up a lot, so I had to be by myself, and I felt so good inside that, Jesus, after all these years, I'm getting choked up now just talking about it.
I'm sorry, yeah.
And that somebody's finally come up with something that I can identify with now. You know what I mean? I said, after all these years, and...
Did you meet Dorothy there at the convention?
Yes, I met Dorothy because I called her up a couple of times. And this atheist that goes to my SOS meeting, he called her up and he got pissed off at her.
Oh, really?
And when he heard that, he was interested in going, but when he heard that it was a minister in the church, he got real irate. And
Dorothy took a lot of hell for that.
Yeah,
Dorothy
I know it.
Yeah.
I know it.
Yeah.
So this is why I got these cups made up. A friend of mine's into that. He does that for conventions and shit for years, different things. But I know him for a lot of years, but I don't know him that well. So what I did is I went down to see him, and I got this, WAFT, the WAAFT. I got that in the red. I told him I want to make a cup, so I told him I'd like to get about 25 of them. Can you make that many for me? He says, well, I'll make the 24 because they do it by so many.
Yeah.
So it cost me, $229 or something.
Oh, wow.
Tax. But so I just happened to have the money around in my little thing I saved to put my quarters and stuff away and stuff. So I had enough to cover it.
I sure like the buttons that you made, the WAF Central button.
This is the same thing that's on the cup now. The buttons that I sent you, that's in red too, the WAFs, right?
Yep.
And the saying that's underneath it. Well, that's on the cup with the AA emblem also.
Well, I'm going to wear the WAF Central button to the convention in Austin, and I'm going to give them to all of the people that work for WAF Central and all the people that work at WAF, the IAC, the convention.
Okay, now so I'm not sure whether I can make the convention or not, but I'll tell you what I'll do.
Okay.
I have these 24 cups. Now I'll send you a few at a time so they don't break then, because I don't know all the people that's involved, but you probably do. Okay. I want to make sure that what's her name?
Dorothy.
Dorothy. But why don't I send you the stuff? And I know it's a hassle for you. You probably got stuff you got to take there.
Not a hassle. Not a problem at all.
Okay. So if I get this shipped to you, then you can distribute them to the people that started this and that that needs it, because I don't know them.
I absolutely will, because I'm going to drive down to Austin. It's not too bad of a drive from Kansas City, and I'll drive down there, and I'll bring the cups down there and give them to those people. Okay,
and I guess there's some out here, too, with Dorothy and them, right?
Dorothy and Pam.
See, I'm going to try to make that thing, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. But I want to get set up so I can, and I like
because
to do it.
Because your wife, you need to take care of your wife. Yeah.
Yeah, she's really bad off.
That's understandable, and I'm glad that you can be there for her.
Yeah, and thanks. That's what I say. Thanks to AA, I'm sober, and I can do stuff like this now, which makes me feel good inside that I'm sober. Thanks to AA.
Yep.
You see, but I have so many resentments inside for AA for the shit that I'm hearing there.
Right.
And the way it's changing now, it's getting worse. So when I go to a convention, I walk around looking at the girls because I go into those meeting rooms. I can't stand this shit that they talk about. Everything is a God thing. Everything that happens, it must be a God thing, and this or that. And,
well, it has gotten worse, but I think that with the WAF Central and WAF IAC and all of these meetings starting up, it'll help change things.
Oh, I feel like it is already, I have a couple of, I tell everybody, I said, I'm not that good on the computer. I said, but get on the computer and look on the WAFs AA, and that'll give you all the information. And if you want, I printed out a bunch of those for the convention. I printed them out in color because they look better in color. So I'm passing them out at different meetings, and I think some of them might throw them away. I don't know, but I keep giving them different meetings where I trust the guys. So that's my little way of thanking you people for putting something like this on. Now I can die in peace that finally got something with people I can identify with, you know.
And we owe you a big debt of gratitude because you were there fighting the fight for all those years, and you started that group in Orange County back in 1980-something or 1990-something, so you're a pioneer. You're a pioneer, John.
When I find that picture, I'll know what year it was. It might be 94.
Yeah.
But and if it wasn't for the guy that had the SOS meeting showing me around in L.A., because he knew how to get around. He was like a mosquito guy, the ones that go around doing that kind of stuff. So he knew his way around L.A., and he took me down there and to the different agnostic meetings, and that's how I started mine in Orange County. Probably the only one in Orange County at the time, but I gave it up. But now I got another thing going in my mind.
Good for you.
I'm going to cut down the SOS meeting to 1 hour, make it from 6 to 7, and then from 7:30 to 9, I'm going to have a WAFs meeting.
Okay. If you need me to send you anything, I can send you. Do you want me just to mail you the format and stuff like that?
That would, for the WAFs? That would be terrific.
Okay, I'll do that.
Because I'm not that smart, you know, and I forget a lot because I'm 86 now, and because that's an excuse. I never was smart to begin with.
I was never smart either, and I'm still not, but I can get on the computer.
Well, that's it for another episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. I hope you enjoyed the program, and we thank you very much for listening.